Spring is in the air. Come with me while I carve my first soapstone piece of the spring carving season. My name is Andrew Gable. I've been an artist my entire life and have been creating and selling my original stone carvings for over a decade. The first thing I like to do is get my stone on the table and start figuring out how I'm going to position my subject into the stone. This one is going to be a grizzly bear, and the stone is a chunk of Costa Rican soapstone that I picked up from a local artist in my city. Once I start seeing how I want to position my bear, I'm going to cut a nice flat base. Since soapstone is soft, I'm able to use just a normal handsaw to cut the flat base. Using a handsaw gives me a lot of control to help with getting my angle correct, and I mostly just eyeball these angles and trust my ability to make accurate cuts. Now for the moment of truth. It's a little off, so I'm just going to make a slight adjustment. I do account for the possibility of making a mistake, so to ensure that if the angle's not correct, that I am able to adjust it without losing too much stone. Alright, that's pretty good. I'm satisfied with that, and now I'm ready to make my first cuts. I'm starting off with the top angle, which will determine the angle of the head and neck. I want to cut a nice flat top to have a clean surface to start drawing in the head. Before I get too detailed with my drawing, I just want to establish the length of the head starting from the front of the ears. Once I'm satisfied with that, I make a cut up to where the front of the ears will be, and now I'm ready to start drawing in more specifically the proportions of the head. What I love about these pieces is that everyone is different and has a unique character and personality. No matter how many times I carve a bear, it's always so fun to see the unique personality that naturally emerges through the carving process. Honestly, it's kind of like having kids. Each one is so unique and different from the other. And I get why people end up with 5 or 6 kids, because you think, wow, this one's so cool, I wonder what the next one would be like. So this is really the blocking in phase. I typically will start with the head and begin blocking in some of the key features and measurements. You can already see the nose there as I continue blocking in the rest of the head. So now with some of those basic shapes blocked in on the head, I slow things down and start using my hand files to refine these shapes. I often use the head and ultimately the length and shape of the nose or muzzle to determine the size of the overall bear. So I will often actually start refining this head before I move on to the rest of the bear. Once I can really start getting a sense of how big this head's going to be, I can then use that to start taking off excess stone in the rest of the bear. Ultimately, layer by layer, I'm bringing this piece down to where I want it to be. So now with the head locked in and the design drawn in on my stone, I'm going to start roughing in the body. Also, keep in mind that I use a ton of photo references that I have on my phone, so as many bears as I've carved, and as familiar as I am with this subject, I use every sculpture as an opportunity to learn more about the form and structure of the bear, playing with what I'd like to express, whether that means pushing some areas into more realism, or perhaps learning to simplify my forms. Each piece I do is a learning experience and an opportunity to refine my expression and grow as an artist. I thought I would just jump in here and talk about the carving so far. He's kind of going to be standing on a rock. It's funny, as I was doing this drawing, I had this image come into my mind of this piece I did called Gaia, probably 5 years ago. One of my favorite pieces of all time, carved out of soapstone from India. And it was just such a great pose. It had such a nice realism to it. I remember I did it really fast, like I carved it really fast. But yeah, I drew a little bit of inspiration from that pose. The bear kind of really leaning on that front foot, but we'll see what this one turns out to be. Already quite different in terms of the facial structure. But yeah, I'm gonna have the back leg standing here. This front leg, he's gonna kind of be leaning on this front leg. I had a little more stone on this side, so I'm gonna do the raised arm kind of coming around here like this, elbow sticking out a little bit. I haven't encountered any cracks or anything in this stone yet. There's a few soft parts. This is a soapstone from Costa Rica, and I bought it from a local artist actually who had some. And to be honest, it's soapstone. It feels just like a lot of the other soapstone I carve. I typically carve Brazilian soapstone. It's very much like that. That's it so far. I'm just kind of working on this section. I'm going to try and sort of rough in the body today. As you can see, I'm using my die grinder with this tool right here. It's kind of, you start with a bigger burr on the end and then you work smaller. I'm actually going to switch it right away here. Yeah, I'm not in a rush. You know what I mean? And you know, that's kind of one of the fortunate things about what I do, especially in today's world, that I'm very grateful for. And it was, maybe it's part of my nature and that's why I ended up doing something like this. But if you look at like social media, it's very like fast-paced, very disposable, right? And stone carving is not fast-paced and not disposable, meaning I'm designing and creating these pieces to last for a lifetime and beyond in people's homes. And so I'm kind of grateful, and it's something that I am aware of and I want to lean into more with my expression and even what I'm talking about and sharing, which is that point of creating something that isn't just something to throw away and you're just trying to quickly create it to get some feedback and then move on to the next thing. I really love the idea that these take a long time to do, and that here I am in this world where everything's trending towards this like hyper consumerism. And don't get me wrong, I am an artist and I sell these pieces, like I am making a product, but what kind of product am I making, right? And so I'm trying to find that intersection between something that feeds me and that is natural to me and that is fulfilling creatively, but also something I can sell. There is a value for something like original art or artists and creatives that are creating content and expressions that they're putting their heart and soul into, I guess you could say, or they're genuinely wanting to create something nice and they're enjoying the process of creating for creative sake. And so I get to really experience that when I create these works of art. After some rainy days, I'm back in the studio with some sunshine, and I get to crack open a fresh box of burrs. As the forms in the body begin to take shape, it's time to start refining the head and face. I tend to do a few more layers when it comes to the face compared to other parts of my sculpture. The faces tend to be the most detailed, with other areas of the sculpture being more simplified. This is where I jump back and forth, mostly between my Dremel and my hand files. The goal of this phase is to set myself up for beginning to carve the eyes and finer details. Getting these base shapes in place is a key element for establishing realism. The finer details is like the cherry on top, but you want to make sure that those underneath layers of shapes and forms are in their right place, because this can really make your piece sing and come to life. I find that strong realism doesn't necessarily happen when you put in the details. Each layer and phase is important, and you can really set yourself up for success by getting those foundational layers accurate. I'm loving the shape of this face. It's fun when I get to the point where I get to use my really small diamond burrs to shape and form the more intricate details and really create a lot of definition in the face. Now with the face really coming alive, it's time to do the same with the body. Using my Makita die grinder, which I've had for about 7 or 8 years, I'm amazed that this tool is still going considering how much I've used it. My die grinder is great for carving in the body and getting in underneath the bear and carving out some negative space and deeper recesses that are really going to create some shadows and definition in this three-dimensional piece. Okay, back to my hand files or Italian rasps to really create some nice tight seams where the different parts of the bear's body connect or meet. Again, because soapstone is so soft, you can really take away a lot of stone with these Italian rasps, which make them great tools. I personally like the one that has a kind of a butter knife shape, and then on the other side it has a rounded shape. There are so many different types of Italian rasps to suit each unique different challenge you might face during the carving process. So my goal right now is to just kind of set up the feet so that I can start carving the claws in. With this paw that's lifting in the air, it's really time to place in the claws and take the form down to its final shape. Moving from the claws up into the foot, into the lower and then upper arms of the bear, kind of tying and uniting all the shapes together so they have a nice flow. As I get in underneath the bear, it really starts to open up and create some nice negative space relationships. Yeah, it's got a nice pose.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. This is another exciting part of the carving process where the final character or expression of the bear is revealed. Now that I have the base shape of the eyes nicely laid in, they are ready for me to carve in the eyes. I will often begin doing this with my Dremel, however you will notice that I alternate between having the Dremel off, where I simply use it to scratch into the stone, as well as having the power on and using it this way as well. Alternating between on and off gives me much more control. I find I do not like to risk having the vibration of the Dremel when it's turned on damage those really fine seams that I can achieve with the Dremel being turned off, where I'm simply shaping the stone by scratching into it like a tiny hand file. I do have plans to create a more intermediate soapstone carving course dedicated to how I actually carve the faces and heads of these bears, where I want to walk through the entire process and structure of how I break down and carve the eyes in detail. Once I have the face complete, one of the final things I like to do is carve some fur texture around the neck, and in this case I carve some around the tail as well. It's just a nice finishing touch that can actually add a lot of realism to your bear. You may have noticed throughout the carving process, but I kept this small buttress to support the foot as I carved. It's now time to carve it away, and honestly, I've been waiting for this moment for a while, so it's really nice to finally see the piece in its full glory. I absolutely loved how this bear turned out. It has such nice symmetry, and I'm just loving the posture of the bear. Alright folks, it's time to start sanding. I prefer the silicone carbide sanding pads on my grinder. I've also used the aluminum oxide ones, but they tend to leave a little bit of staining on the stone, which you can get off easily, but it is just simpler to use the silicone carbide. Because it's soapstone, I often will start with a finer grit of around 120 on account of soapstone being so soft. As I often say, I'm actually still carving during this process as I sand, taking the opportunity to further refine the muscles and forms in the bear, and not just blasting all the hard work that I've put in to carefully define the various muscles and forms in the bear. I'll typically do a few layers, sanding up to about a 400 grit, and then depending on the piece, I will do a wet sand by hand, maybe a 600 grit or even higher. With the sanding done, it's time to wash this piece off in water to just take away any dust residue on the stone so it doesn't mix in with my wax when I begin applying it for the final finish. It's also a nice opportunity to get a sneak peek of the color of this stone, which will be a bit more pronounced once the wax is applied, but it's always nice to see it during this phase also. A toothbrush is a great way to get into those hard to reach spots, and also taking the opportunity to do a bit more sanding and cleaning up of any areas that I see aren't totally sanded. Yes, one last thing, I like to use this rasp to add some texture to the face. It's just a way to add a bit more diversity to the piece, and I find it helps accentuate the details of the face. Now it's time for the wax. This is just natural beeswax that I'm melting onto the stone. I like using a blowtorch that has a trigger so I can easily apply and stop the flame as I alternate between heating the stone and applying the wax. Once the wax is applied, I like to go over the entire piece and wipe off any excess wax or areas where the wax might not have a smooth consistency. It really helps the overall look. Once the wax dries, I'll actually go back in and buff some of the areas with my buffer on my die grinder to give the piece a bit of sheen. I almost always have to go back and scrape off areas where the wax drips down onto the rock or around the seams of the feet where the feet meet the rock.
Ooh, look at that guy! Little beauty!
Yeah.
Beautiful! Very nice!
So here is the finished piece. The color never fails to amaze me in soapstone, and this piece is no exception. If you're interested in collecting my original work, feel free to reach out to me or visit my website to find pieces I currently have available. Thank you for taking the time to join me on this journey and support my creative expression as an artist in this world. Stay tuned for more projects, and I'll see you guys in the next video.